Fighting Apple Music fraud, satellite services are hard, and Congress questions Apple. This is Mac Voices. Today's Mac Voices is supported by MacVoices Featured Gear, like the Twinkly app-controlled LED holiday lights. Twinkly delivers the ultimate in flexible lighting for your Christmas tree, holiday decor, or everyday use. Find the links at macvoices.com/featured gear. All one word, featured gear. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, a quick reminder that we were testing out some new software for this Mac Voices live session, so things get a little rough in places with the audio and the video. Please bear with us. Let's go back and let the panel start talking about Apple fighting Apple Music fraud. But let me throw the next one in that I had here in mind to that chat room and over to this chat room. That Apple has, sorry, got distracted there. That Apple has implemented some things to cut back on music fraud, which is something that I think we've touched on before, but I had no idea that it was going on to this degree, that apparently they've cut down by 30% music fraud because some musicians have been securing bots to just play only their music so they can get paid by Apple Music. Really?
Wow.
Really what?
I mean, I guess I should not be surprised, given human nature, that someone would find a way to game the system like this. But that seems to be like potentially an awful lot of trouble for just not a lot of revenue.
It's not that much trouble. I mean, the whole thing is setting up little farms that automatically do the same thing over and over on the internet. That's like old hat. It's how advertising companies were gaming ad revenue tracking. It's how Bitcoin mining has worked. DDoS attacks. That's how they work. So setting this up to do or to play songs over and over. That's an easy lift right there. Related to this, I did see today that Spotify has said that songs that get under a certain threshold of plays, they're not going to pay royalties to those artists. So it's like, I don't remember what the number is, but it was like if your song has less than 10,000 plays, it might be lower than that. Then you're not, that artist isn't going to get any money for it, which sounds to me like a great incentive for people to start running bots to play their songs on Spotify all the time.
Well, so Jeff, I guess that, but wouldn't each one of those bots have to have a separate Apple Music account, or at least only a limited number of bots would be able to sign in with a given Apple Music account?
Just make a bunch of bogus accounts, just keep making them. You can probably automate the whole process of creating Apple IDs and then just have them play songs.
Apple is fighting it, and apparently they're putting a dent in it to some degree. And if you're an artist out there who is engaging in this, or if you're an artist who wants to engage in it, call Jeff, because apparently he knows how to do
it. Yeah, Ben and I, we're starting a new company. We'll get you paid.
Ben, I'm afraid I interrupted you earlier. What did you want to add?
This honestly does not surprise me. Musicians are making considerably less than they were in the physical media days. So, I mean, they have to work far harder than they were when back in the old CDs and record contracts days. So, if they, I'm not surprised that some of them have turned to trying to scam it like this.
Dave, you're kind of quiet. Any thoughts on this?
I think there's going to be some lot of scammers out there. They're trying to do this stuff, like Ben said. But I think overall, this is something that they needed to do, and they're protecting, and that's good to see that it's 30% less than fraud. But there's always going to be somebody out there that's looking to, get around the system. How I say it, whether it's Apple Music, whether it's Spotify, whether it's YouTube Music, when it's any of the music services that are out there, it's bound to happen. But this is good to see that Apple has dropped in any of this fraudulent activity.
Well, I guess it just goes to show you all the things that Apple has to deal with. That and
Right.
I'm sure the same thing is happening on Spotify and any of the other music services.
Oh, for sure.
That are streaming music and therefore paying royalties. That we don't see that, or we don't appreciate just what it takes to run some of these operations.
I mean, it's the same thing with YouTube, with paying royalties too. So, they're paying royalties to the music as well as when on YouTube itself, with the content creators, there's bounds of ways to try to get that going.
I wanted to throw this one in. That Qualcomm was apparently attempting to copy Apple's satellite SOS, and they killed it after 10 months. And then in a related story, I don't have a link for that right now, but that the Apple satellite SOS thing will continue to be free for another year.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out where these two stories cross up. Why did Qualcomm drop it? And has Apple decided it was that much of a differentiator? Because the by my calendar, the announcement about it continuing for another year came after Qualcomm dropped it. So it feels like one of the potential competitors already had dropped out, and yet Apple decided to make it free for another year.
We're looking at the wrong.
Surely you don't think Apple is paying attention to Qualcomm?
No, I don't. You're right, Jeff or Jim. I don't. But I look at it and just think, okay, just interesting timing was all. Jeff?
Yeah, Chuck doesn't have an SOS network. They are buying service from other companies. So Qualcomm is competing with these other companies and apparently decided that they can't compete in that space. So they're not going to. And that I don't think has anything directly to do with Apple offering an SOS feature on the iPhone. So the other side of this, which I also don't think is related to Qualcomm, is Apple saying, "Hey, we're extending the service as a free feature for another year." I think they're going to do it again and again, keep extending it, or maybe their next move will just be to say, "Oh, by the way, this is just a feature of the iPhone," and I think that Apple is not going to ever charge for the SOS feature because the optics of someone being screwed when SOS doesn't work because they weren't paying for it and they needed it and now someone dies, that is not something Apple wants on the headlines with their name attached to it. So I think ultimately Apple's just going to say, you know what? We decided this feature is so important that as a truly altruistic measure, we're just going to keep this free for everyone forever because it's that important. Just like we'll never add a fee for you to use the EKG feature on your Apple Watch or the fall detection feature. This is just part of what you get by being an Apple customer.
The difference is that Apple doesn't pay for every time that somebody does an EKG on their watch. Like that's built into the hardware, whereas this is a service. I could see a point where they do need to charge for it to keep it going. I mean, they can fold it in because they're rich and blah, blah, blah. But it's a business too. And I could see having a charge for it, and maybe they just haven't worked out how to do it yet.
Okay. Jim?
I can see that.
I think the question is, how is Apple being charged for it? I think the service is run by Globalstar, and Apple's buying it from them. So is Apple paying Globalstar each time somebody makes an emergency call? Or is Apple paying some fixed amount and it doesn't matter how many calls? So one thing is when they first announced it, Apple probably had no idea how often this would get used. So they might not have had a good basis for knowing whether they could give it away or not. I kind of suspect that what's going to happen is they're never going to charge for the SOS feature, but maybe down the road, there'll be a non-emergency feature that you could maybe send text messages and maybe receive text messages from anybody, and then that will cost money.
Okay. Ben?
Jim? I have a feeling that Apple's investment or Apple's payment to Globalstar came in the form of investment, because Apple lended $252 million to Globalstar. So my guess is that Apple will continue to pay by supporting their satellite network. But maybe you're right. Maybe they will add in a fee for a non-emergency satellite feature.
The byline on this tells a lot about it. Apparently, the Android manufacturers all had the option of using this and did not. And I think that's where you see the difference between Apple and iOS and the iPhone and all the Android manufacturers. With Apple, you have one vision. With the Android manufacturers, you have everybody trying to do their own thing and make money off of it.
Well, it's mostly Samsung, isn't it?
In the States.
Well, that's a good point, too. We tend to think of it just in
even
the US,
worldwide, though, outside of China.
So, Jim, I way underestimated or way underreported how much Apple invested. It was actually $450 million, not $252 million. I'm just sitting here looking up links left and right.
Making my show notes longer, Jeff. Thank you.
So how much is that per
Doing
iPhone?
my part to help.
Well, that's a good question.
Not
Jim.
very
How
much.
is that per iPhone? Yeah. Today's Mac Voices is supported by MacVoices Featured Gear, like the Twinkly app-controlled LED holiday lights. Twinkly delivers the ultimate in flexible lighting for your Christmas tree, holiday decor, or everyday use. With a variety of lengths to suit your needs, Twinkly lets you go beyond the blank options of other lights, giving you the ability to create your own simple or complex designs with full control of color and design placement via the addressable LEDs. Use the app to get exactly the look you want. See how the Twinkly app lets you create and sculpt all kinds of unique designs for your lights, or use the presets to give you a spectacular look for the holidays, parties, or just to add some uniqueness to your own home in 2 Mac Voices interviews from CES, Mac Voices number 20074 and Mac Voices number 23038. The demonstration in Mac Voices number 20074 is still one of my all-time favorites because I wasn't expecting anything like what Twinkly delivers. Find the links and more at macvoices.com/featured gear. That's all one word, featured gear. macvoices.com/featured gear. So the next one I had, some of this stuff happened just after we did the last show. But apparently Congress wants to talk to Apple and Jon Stewart about the fact that they went their separate ways with Jon Stewart's show on Apple TV+. Is this a good thing?
It's Congress.
Well,
No.
If I could be so blunt, if you're a person in public office that just wants to make it look like you give a crap, it's a great thing.
I think the concern is the fact of the freedom of speech, the freedom of being able to say what talk about anything. That's the First Amendment. I see that why the government might be getting involved with this, but again, this is nothing. When are they getting involved with this when there's so many times that's violated? So what I don't understand why they would even care, other than if it's worried about something between the U.S. and China, because they're obviously trying to repair their relationship too, which that happened recently too. So,
Well, it's a publicity stunt for the congressman involved.
It's complicated for all parties here. Apple does need to negotiate its business in China. At the same time, there's going to be some due diligence here to see if a major American company is under the influence of a competing power. I'm sure nothing will come of this, but it's not surprising.
Oh, Ben, you used an interesting phrase, under the influence of a competing power.
Yes, I'm trying to say things.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm trying to say things very careful to not be political.
Well, listen, I think we all are, but I guess I'm trying to find a good analogy, but is it under the influence of someone else if you decide that you're not going to just wave the flag and scratch that, because that conjures the wrong image, that you're not going to hire someone who's just going to beat the daylights out of one of your best customers constantly, and doing so out of a sense of political correctness or their own beliefs, as opposed to maybe objective facts.
And there lies the sensitivity of the issue. I mean, Apple as a company has their own people they answer to, their own agenda, which is usually making money, which involves most of their manufacturing being in China. So they're going to have to definitely walk the line to a certain point within that Chinese system. At the same time, they are an American company, so Congress has to do its due diligence as well.
Okay, I'll buy that. I'll buy that. It just, everything I read, well, Brian, you had said it. I'd rather have you say it than me say it, as to, the way it was postured.
Yeah, I was looking at the story, and it does say towards the end, it talks about how, Apple didn't actually cancel the show, but rather Stewart reportedly decided to walk away from the program, and rather than compromise on creative control. And I don't have to find a link, of course, but there's been other TV shows from Apple that we've heard about, where Apple comes in and has some creative differences that they want to talk to the producers about, I think, and not necessarily always agree.
Jim?
It's not the first time.
Yes.
Your comment on First Amendment rights.
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, a company can't violate someone's First Amendment rights. The First Amendment says the government shall not infringe on someone's right to say anything. So Jon Stewart can go on the street corner, say whatever he wants, but Apple doesn't have any obligation to broadcast that through their, let's say, network. I don't know what you call it nowadays. So, this isn't a First Amendment issue, and I don't see how Congress has, they don't have there's no cause for Congress to stick their nose in. Apple writes the checks. They get to say what goes out under their name. And, you may or may not disagree with it. I mean, I'm sorry to see Jon Stewart not be on Apple TV anymore. But, Apple has every right to decide what's going to go out under their name.
There was another article that I looked at, the Ars Technica. They said that Apple's China ties are under congressional scrutiny. So, are they scrutinizing the fact that they cancel it because of their ties with China, and is there some influence there? I mean, there's another thing to question.
But I don't think that would be illegal.
No, not at all. I mean, it's Apple's choice, obviously.
So,
but I mean, congressional hearings aren't a legal matter.
Right, they're not.
It's Congress finding information.
So, do you all consider Jon Stewart a journalist of any stripe, or is he an entertainer, or is he a pundit? Where does he fall in your judgment with everything he's accomplished in his career up to this point?
I would probably put him in the cross between a journalist and a pundit.
Dave, Brittany, Jim. Dave, repeat yours, please.
I would probably have him fall under being a pundit. I mean, he's always done political satire for a long time when he did The Daily Show and many other shows in relation to this. So, I mean, he has some journalistic involvement, but I think more of a pundit than anything else, in my opinion.
Brittany?
I don't think it has to be just one. Like, he's done all of those things.
Okay, that's fair. Jim?
I'm wondering, why are you asking that? Because the First Amendment, if the government is censoring someone, the First Amendment applies no matter which of those they fall under. I mean, there have been cases in the
government's not
past when things that were purely entertainment that have been censored. So, I don't think they don't get different rights depending on which of those categories they fall into.
To answer that, and then I want to get the rest of the panel in, but the reason I ask is because I think of journalists being held to a certain standard, whereas entertainers and pundits aren't. And I'm not talking about First Amendment rights or anything, Jim. I'm just talking about in general as someone who has a voice, large or small, through whatever platform or platforms, that when I look at them, I say, okay, which category am I putting that individual in? And therefore, I'm measuring them by certain yardsticks. Let's see. I want to catch up. Let's see. Barry in the chat room says, I think of Jon Stewart currently as an entertainer activist. It's really interesting.
I
description.
like that description.
Yeah.
I can see that too. Yeah, he's done a lot of activist type news stories on the problem for all those many years.
Yeah. Eric?
Yeah, there are a lot of comedians who've sort of gone on to mix the activism, entertaining commentary. He was an early one. There are a lot more currently out there as well. It's kind of a whole category.
Okay. Jeff?
I'm calling him an entertainer and a pundit. When you get people of this caliber, and it happens a lot with comedians, you get really, really smart people, and Jon Stewart has been lucky enough to have had the opportunities to really leverage that, and he's doing a great job with it. Whether you agree with his opinions or not, he's doing a really great job with leveraging his experience, his knowledge, and his talents to be able to do this sort of thing. So yeah, he's an entertainer first, and I think he would tell you that without hesitation. But he's definitely a pundit, and I do like what Barry said, that he's an entertainer activist.
Webb Bixby couldn't be with us tonight, but he's in our chat room, and he says, I don't see Jon Stewart as a journalist. And then Matthew in the chat room says he's been called a satirist. He's not Mark Twain or Roy Rogers. Yeah, isn't that the truth? But he did win the Mark Twain Prize, I think. So,
yeah, he did.
Did he? Okay. I don't know.
For all those many years of what he did on the Daily Show. I mean, that was a long run.
I find it really intriguing in an age where there's so much concern over all of us getting our news from X, from Facebook, from TikTok, from the social media, that someone who is a satirist, activist, entertainer, pundit, whatever, seems to have so much potential sway over so many people, not being held accountable to any journalistic standards, and then having someone disagree with what he says on their platform, and nobody said any, no one has said he was fired. They went their separate ways, and then Congress decided to look into it. Just throw that all into a blender and hit the button, and it just doesn't feel real good to me. But maybe it's
you keep saying Congress, like Congress as an entity did this, when it's like some congressman who's looking for publicity for himself. It's not Congress as an entity that's doing this.
Yeah, but they you're not wrong, Jim, except that we have to, I feel like we have to attribute it to Congress as an entity, because it's one of the, unless only one politician comes out and says, and I'm going to refrain from using any names, but unless one politician comes out and says, I think this is wrong, or I want to investigate this, it feels like the power of Congress is being invoked. I mean, what are we going to? I think it's. I'm not sure. I don't have the date exactly. In front of me,
individual Congresspeople that are committee chairmen can do that.
And so, what happens? It's December 10th or 15th, I think it is, that Apple has until that date to respond. So, what happens on the day after if they don't respond? If they just ignore it, if they just say, "Hey, this is not a congressional hearing. We're not answering." Apple looks guilty as sin of something. I'm not even sure what, but they look guilty.
Well, if there's a hearing, they'll respond. If there's not a hearing, then what is it for them to respond to?
As far as I can tell, they
And
have
I
not
also,
been formally subpoenaed.
Right.
and I would also, we talk about journalistic standards, and I think, most of us lived through a period where it seemed like there were some, but that's sort of the exception in, the history of our country. And you go back and, it used to be there was all these different newspapers, and each newspaper, had their own point of view, and there was no checking. And it's just kind of like social media now. Like, that's how newspapers work. There's lots of quote unquote journalists, especially when you get onto the more pundit side, that, who knows, what they're saying is quote unquote true or not, or what their agenda is.
We've had satirists. We have a rich history of satirists in this country. One of the things that Jon Stewart has done, he laid the groundwork so that so many other people could build on that whole idea as well. And that's why we have people like Stephen Colbert, Samantha Bee, John Oliver, Trevor Noah. These are all entertainer, pundits, activists, and I think that a lot of their success comes directly from the work of Jon Stewart.
And Trevor Noah and John Oliver literally worked for Jon Stewart.
Right.
Actually, all these people worked for Stewart. Yeah, and Samantha Bee.
Yes.
And Samantha Bee.
Samantha Bee. And Stephen Colbert, too.
But all of them, then and now, work for, large corporations that from time to time, I'm sure they've all been subject to, you can't say that.
Well, for sure.
I'm sure they all have.
So that brings up that's an interesting question as far as you can't say that. Why can't you say it?
If you work for NBC, can you say bad things about GE? Maybe, maybe not. I remember that was a thing with David Letterman and the GE Handshake. Anybody remember that?
Oh, sure.
Oh my God, that was fantastic. Yeah.
Brian gave us this link. I'll throw it into the YouTube chat. That apparently these are the members of the select committee on the Chinese Communist Party that sent this request to Apple. And it is a bipartisan committee. So,
all committees are bipartisan, but one side is running them,
and that's a lot of white people. Wow.
Look again. I believe it's a lot of.
I would say Roger Krishnamurthy is my congressman in Illinois, and he's not white.
They're not that. That's a relatively mixed group, Jeff.
Yes. Apparently, the page froze on me. It was only showing the Republican members. My bad. So now I've refreshed the page, and now
he's a ranking member. Oh my God.
Okay, it's nice to see that there's better representation in this group than what it looked like when the page first loaded for me. Wow.
Britt, I think you were commenting and you were frozen, or excuse me, muted.
I'm okay. No, it was only the comment way back then that the show actually apparently wasn't doing very well, and so it could be a little from column A, a little from column B. Let's just axe it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's good perspective that nobody has brought up yet, or even mentioned, or even researched. So I don't know. It's just one of those things. I mean, once more, it's if Mark Fuccio were here, he'd probably say that a lot of it's clickbait because it's Apple's name, and as we start out the conversation, it gets people's names in the headlines. So.
Wait, Mark doesn't need to be here. I thought that's what I said at the very beginning.
Well, you did, and I just gave you credit.
Stunt.
Yeah.
No, you said Mark Fuccio needed to be here to say it.
Well, he loves the term clickbait, and he's not wrong for a lot of this stuff. But this is not clickbait.
I think the Congress people, they're not right. They're looking to have things to say to their constituents at the next election, probably the next primary.
This MacVoices Live panel wraps up next time as we finish up our experiment with some new software and talk about our favorite whipping boy, Microsoft. Find out why next time on MacVoices. I'm Chuck Joyner. As always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices each month. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.